local or visiting artists every week. We try to talk about their process, talk about upcoming work or never before seen work or past work. So we're really lucky to have people share that with us. You're at CPW in our rented space where we have a new exhibition up of Adriana Alt's work curated by our very own Adam Ryan, who's in the audience. So if you have any questions, he is the one I'm looking at right now, so you can find him. And that will be up through March, I believe. And next week we'll actually have Addie in-house to talk about the work, so that'll be nice. Tonight we're joined by Andrea Orejarena and Caleb Stein. They're both multimedia artist duo based in New York. Their work examines the intersection of technology, memory, and the duo's desire to explore American mythologies and narratives. Fascinated with the emergent properties inherent to photographing as a pair using only a single camera, their practice explores collaboration in an individualistic medium. Orejarena and Stein conduct extensive research into collective image production within a world saturated by visual images. Their work has been exhibited internationally and can be found within public and private collections, including the J. Paul Getty Museum, the Museum of Fine Arts, the Newman Art Foundation, the Francis Lehman Loeb Center, New York State Museum, and the Anne Tenenbaum and Thomas H. Lee Family Collection, among others. A collection of their work, Long Time No See, was published by Zazie Press in 2022 and is held in the Special Collections Library of the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Museum of Modern Art. Their second publication, American Glitch, will be published February 2024. Orejarena and Stein were selected as 2024 Foam Talents with their series American Glitch to be exhibited in a group show at Foam in Amsterdam, opening in February 22nd, 2024. The duo will have their first solo museum exhibition, Tactics and Mythologies, curated by Nadine Isabel Heinrich, which will include work from the project's Long Time No See and American Glitch, opening at the Deichtorhallen Museum in Hamburg in September 2024. And a solo exhibition of American Glitch will also open at Apollo Gallery on Bond Street in New York on February 9th, 6 p.m. So if you're in the city, an artist talk will be held with David Campany on February 27th at Apollo. So if you can get there. Will it be live streamed or do you have to go in person? Cool. Well, we might have to take a trip down. Without further ado, let's please welcome Caleb and Andrea. Thank you.
Thank you for the lovely introduction and for having us. And thank you everyone for being here tonight. We're excited to share a project with you.
Thanks as well for being here. It's really exciting. We're big fans of CPW and been following it for a while. So we're going to share a preview of American Glitch with you all tonight.
Yeah. Maybe for different heights. I'll use this one.
Okay.
Hello. Okay. So American Glitch is a slip. We're looking at the slip between fact and fiction in the American landscape, and really looking at like the long-standing photographic tradition of going into the American open road. And we wanted to do this with a contemporary lens of what it's like to go into the American road with the existing overload of images that we have on the internet now. It should be slightly different from many of our heroes that we studied very deeply during this project. And here, let me see. So the beginning of the project actually was it was a lot of research. So we did a lot of visual research looking at places in which the online internet started calling things on the American landscape glitches. And so this is a glitch. This is, people would say this is, what would they say? Sorry,
They'd say it's a glitch in real life, or this is evidence that we're living in a simulation.
They would quote a lot of film, a lot of, this is the Truman Show, very Matrix, and so this is started becoming like a very colloquial trend that we were seeing online, and we really wanted to investigate it visually. And so we started pooling all these archives of every time someone quoted something visual as a glitch. And they would be, a lot of times it would be in a thread, and many different people would post different angled versions of that same thing, or say, oh, I lived there, I saw that, oh, my childhood best friend sent me this. Like, there were these threads, and so that really fascinated us. And so we included it in the book because it really was important for the conception of this project. And we've superimposed them and layered them with our photographs. So after we did this archive, we went out on the open road and looked for our own glitches. Oftentimes we found locations that people quoted themselves online. And we had this huge binder of locations to visit. And then along the way, we looked for other visual things that inspired us. And we really love doing this with photography because of photography's loaded relationship with veracity and the expectation that what we're showing through a lens be like factual in a way that other mediums like paintings aren't held to that expectation. And there are also a lot of characteristics with photography and veracity. For example, before, black and white photographs were the standard, and then if something was in color, then it would be viewed as more real. And now maybe if something is black and white, it's viewed as more real. So like, what is real? What is fiction? What is parafiction? We're really interested in that whole conversation, especially with the medium of photography. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a point that we have sort of considered in depth over the last 4 years, this sort of question of, okay, so there's this, I mean, this is well explored territory at this point, but there's still a widespread assumption that a photograph is objective. But when you add, the internet and fake news and conspiracy theories and the advent of the metaverse and bots, and now all sorts of even AI work being integrated into very mainstream software like Photoshop, those sorts of questions are really coming up in a very pronounced way. And we sort of were playing around with this. And what we saw online was that people that were saying, okay, this is evidence of a glitch in real life, or are we living in a simulation? The vast majority of those people and the examples that they were citing, it was not meant earnestly. It's sort of meant in a sort of satirical, cultural protest of sorts, as sort of like a kind of like humor as a coping mechanism for this insane moment that we're all living in. And we're really interested in that idea of how humor and play can actually be very powerful ways of thinking about our relationship to the internet, to this moment, and also to the US, which is both of our adopted homes.
And the ways in which this visual overload also impacts, like, for example, the Supreme Court, whether AI, like how we can use evidence images, whether it's knowing if something is made with AI or not, disinformation, it's just all of this overload in all forms beyond photographic as well. And also another thing that really interested us was the pixel. And so Hito Steyerl often talks about ways in which circulated images, as they get circulated more and more, the pixel gets larger and larger, and we kind of viewed that almost like a fingerprint of the life that the image on the internet has had. And we're really fascinated by that as well. So hopefully that, maybe it might show in the screen, but if not, it will definitely show in the book, yeah.
I think that's something that we've been discussing a lot lately, going back to what Andrea said about how maybe at a certain point, black and white was seen as more real, or by sort of leaning into a grittiness that was widely seen as a sort of representation of reality. We were sort of thinking, well, what are the kind of aesthetic frameworks that are widely seen as objective right now? And we were sort of interested in two main modes. We've heard people say that actually the most truthful image of 2024 is the pixelated image, because it's honest about the way that it's been circulated. It's not trying to pull anything over anyone. And then on the other hand, thinking about images of the state and police, and how there's this sort of aesthetic of evidence-based photography, where if you show something in a fully frontal way with no apparent distortion, then that is still widely seen as a sort of representation of a fact. and thinking about how German photographers in particular have used that, and how that could be applied to looking at the American landscape. Even when, in some cases, some of these images may have been manipulated by AI, some of these images have their own sort of mythologies that surround them, and, you know, just sort of playing around with that as a sort of medium is the message way of working.
The Dusseldorf school really influenced us visually in this project as well.
So one of the locations that we went to is a Mars simulation that is primarily funded by Elon Musk, and it's located in the Utah desert, and it's not concerned with sort of rigorous scientific simulation, although there are very interesting scientists that go there. The key focus of this organization is the sort of psychological conditioning of what life on Mars might look like. And we heard this story, which is sort of, it's kind of amazing. I mean, you should tell the story. You tell it better.
Okay. Well, we don't know if this story is true, but basically we heard the story while we were driving through the desert, and we found this space, and we're like, what is this? And we photographed it, and then we saw, as we were photographing it, we saw people with astronaut suits walking around it. And this was before we knew what it was. And so we tried to ask them, you know, what's going on? They're like, they couldn't talk to us. And we're like, okay, they cannot talk to us. We respected that. We went back into town and asked around, you know, what was that? And they said, basically, they told us what it was, and then they told us a story about this husband and wife who participated in this experiment. So it's 2 weeks, and you have to be in simulation. So the way that they quote it is like, you can't break simulation. So they wear their astronaut suits when they go out. They can only go out for 2 hours a day, which is how much oxygen you would have, etc. And you can't get contaminated. And so as the story goes, the husband and wife, on the 5th day, the wife had dropped her glove, and technically she would have been contaminated. And so they all had to go back inside, and they had to vote whether they can have her back in. They can let her back in, whether she's voted off the island. And everyone voted, you know, well, you know, this is how we could have saved her. This is how we could, you know, came up with stories of how it would be possible, except her husband. Her husband was the only one who voted her off the island, and she had to go home. So, yeah, which is really funny. And we actually tried very hard. They very kindly let us photograph the exterior, but in the moment said, in order to not break sim, we had to be part of the simulation if we wanted to photograph them. And very kindly, the New York Times sent us back to photograph the simulation, and we participated in the simulation 2 years later. And I think we have a photo. No, we don't.
No,
we can share it with you guys after the book. We'll share a photo of you guys at the simulation. Yeah.
But we were sort of, you know, thinking, okay, why is it that so many of the places that get put forward on the internet as glitches in real life, why are they in such remote parts of the country? And why is it that in many cases that they have direct or kind of indirect associations with the military? And we were sort of thinking that maybe something about that sort of peripheral location, or the fact that there's enormous secrecy around some of the locations, maybe that encourages people to sort of imagine, and that's maybe why it gets put forward as a glitch in some ways.
There's a fake tree with real birds.
So we're really thinking about glitch as a large framework for playing around within. And one of the key influences in terms of sort of what constitutes glitch, I mean, like Andrea said, you know, the Truman Show, The Matrix, Black Mirror, those sorts of things. But also, I think the amount of time that we're all spending on screens, and in particular video games and video game glitches and Google Earth views, it's sort of like we've begun to inhabit this virtual world. And then in some cases, when we leave that behind and go out into the physical world, we end up projecting that onto it in a way.
I also like to think about a time in which we'd see a tree and think it would be weird that there were cables coming out of it, but that's actually so normal now. Yeah, I think it's kind of weird, yeah.
So one of the key locations for this project was Fort Irwin, where they conduct these fake battles they have a fake Iraqi village, and there are sort of public tours that are available, but if you want a higher level of access, you have to go through a lot of bureaucracy, and we sort of were lucky that we had a contact who was friendly there, and we visited a few times, and we actually ended up even directing them as they sort of enacted a fake storming of this building.
And there are moments in which this image reminds us of a lot of images that we see in the press, often that are real. Oftentimes this image, people know it through video games as well, this situation. But then if you look closer, there are moments in which, for example, the man is in contrapposto. So moments of leisure where you can see that it's not a real battle.
It's in the Mojave Desert. It's called Fort Irwin.
We have another photo of it from a more aerial view to show you the rest of it, yeah.
So one of the components of this project was entering video games and sort of finding the little pots of gold at the end of the rainbow that would make them glitch, and then sending ourselves those screenshots and kind of reworking them and integrating those video game glitches into the book. So, I mean, the video game glitch is sort of a background that informs how this kind of manifests on a popular level, but then it's also in the book and in upcoming exhibitions in a more explicit form that we've, sort of joined that long tradition of kind of composing photographs inside of virtual spaces, with people like Doug Rickard. And this is David's wonderful essay. So that's sort of mock-ups of the book as it would sort of appear physically. But we also wanted to share with you the sort of a sneak peek at the complete kind of PDF.
So this is one of my favorite images. We call it Synthetic Street. This is a real photo from a fake town that was built during World War II to protect the Boeing planes. And so they had the Boeing planes here, and then on top of that, they built a ground and then a fake town on top of it. And then if you look carefully, the buildings are much smaller than the people. Like something's off. The more you look at it, the more off you find things. But I like it because it's a real photo of a fake town, and this is actually a real photo that someone found. And so often when people look at this superimposition that we made or collage that we made, people often think that that is the real one and that is a fake subject. But this is technically more real than that, because that isn't a real sighting that somebody saw. I think it was a pilot took this, right? Yeah.
So ultimately, we spent the first year and a half of the project, which began in 2020. So it sort of in some ways started as a pandemic project.
And we couldn't go out. We run our screens all day.
And so we accumulated this archive of probably 2,000 glitch in real life photographs, maybe about 100 glitch in real life videos. It's also sort of interesting to think about how motion changes what people consider as a glitch. It sort of introduces a whole different component. We also have glitch in real life stories, and so there was sort of many layers to it before we even picked up a camera and went out on the road.
I also like that special component to the book, and I really like thinking about how photographs have completely different experiences in a book versus on a wall. And in this situation, Jason Noctwell, who designed this book, had the brilliant idea of putting the name of the actual JPEG next to the images, which is really interesting to follow. You can see how many times, and then he did it with our photographs too, so kind of privy to our organization or lack of, but yeah.
This was another key location for the project. It's called California City, and it's located very close to the Edwards Air Force Base. And basically an entire blueprint of the perfect town was built, complete with avenues, smaller streets, even cul-de-sacs, but nothing was ever built.
We heard, also don't know if it's true or fake, but we heard in a podcast once that this space later, so they had sold property there, they sold homes there. People bought the homes, then the company disappeared. And later they excavated it and they found that there was no actual infrastructure under the ground, which technically should have been built before the roads were paved. And so technically there was never an intention to build anything anyway. So we think of this image as, you know, the blueprint of a perfect American town, but only the lines drawn with no intention of being built.
But also online, this gets cited as sort of a motherboard or as some sort of updated,
like NASDAQ lines.
Yeah, the Nazca lines.
We also really love ways in which people view glitch as synchronicity or a spiritual perspective of it. Oftentimes it might be like an uncanny, like divine figure in the sky. I don't know if you guys remember the toast, that there was a Virgin Mary in the toast that later went on tour, I think sold, you know, for $1 million or something. But I really like when that happens with doppelgangers, or even moments in which you can, like, if you can take a moment, which is what I love about photography, is that it slows me down at least, and I see things that I would otherwise not see. And there's something about going into this project with the understanding and framework of glitch and the uncanny that it's almost spiritual when you look at those things, because some of them can't be explained and are a bit too surreal. And so I did like that, yeah.
Yeah, in some ways, it's the idea of a glitch for us is just an update of you know, a Jungian, like Andrea said, a Jungian synchronicity, or the idea of deja vu, or sort of having a sublime experience. And I think that's sort of important for us, because it would be easy for us to have done this work in a sort of sarcastic way. But I mean, personally, and I think this is the case for both of us, neither of us are really interested in work that's made with sarcasm. And, you know, we made this work with a lot of love, and we were talking to David about this work early on, and he said, well, actually, to be critical of the country that you live in is kind of a wonderful act of love. We've been thinking about that a lot.
I think also neither of us are from the US, but we consider it our home. We moved when we were very young. And I remember the process of assimilation, actually a lot of these conversations being key points into assimilating into American culture. Like, you'd go to sleepovers and you'd talk about, you know, who killed JFK, or what's going on with these crop circles, Area 51. Like, that was something that as a kid was so fascinating and part of very, like, you know, cemented in my memory of assimilation to this country. Oh, that was an aerial view of Fort Irwin as well.
The banana is my favorite.
Yeah, we want to put it on a t-shirt. Another part of the project is a lot of documents, government documents that were released that started circulating on the internet, especially TikTok or Instagram. I don't know if you remember when the what was the name of the first one? The Gateway Experience. So it was basically the CIA had released experiments that they were doing in which they were testing to see if this idea of manifestation was real, of what was happening in the 60s Cultural Revolution, if that was actually, you know, they were trying to suppress it by, you know, coining the hippie term or things like that, but at the same time putting their top physicists to work on whether to see if this actually is real, and their final findings were like, we cannot say they're not. So they were saying that it's, again, like very evasive, like not necessarily yes, not necessarily no, but it's very interesting because during the pandemic, peak of the pandemic, when we were all in quarantine, I don't know if you guys ever like got to the point of like washing your vegetables with soap, but that headspace was when it started circulating on TikTok, that specific document. And then all of them started to circulate about FBI leaked documents, things like that. And then that's where when we came across the birds aren't real movement. That, you know, birds are surveillance drones and we're all in our homes because they're charging their drones, and which is really funny. And I heard a talk with the guy who coined that movement and kind of went around, you know, pushing it. And he did a talk where he kind of talked about how it was his own version of pushing back on disinformation. You know, it's like, oh yeah, which is really, I mean, I highly recommend hearing him talk about it. The moments of, you know, it's inspiring, but also hilarious. He's great.
This is one of my favorite pages in the book. Both of these images are AI images. They began by sort of being sourced. You know, they were put forward as evidence of a glitch in real life by an anonymous person on the internet, and then they were reworked using various forms of sort of AI technology. And the one on the left, even though it wasn't a screenshot from Google Earth, somehow AI made it look like it was, which was sort of interesting to us. And then, you know, certain AI softwares are more convincing than others, and on the right you sort of see things falling apart, and also that sort of multicolored series of squares in the bottom right corner is kind of an indication of the AI at work as well.
And a lot of this project for us is about looking carefully. And for example, with AI images that were made like a year ago, 2 years ago, they wouldn't have this logo that's now being, you know, like enforced on all AI images. And so it's really interesting to have both versions of it, and kind of just like in the book, because when we started making the project, so much of that has evolved, like the use of AI images. And so it's really interesting to see that too.
These are your images?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we were thinking about is how the whole tradition of photographing the US landscape is already sort of deeply engaged with this idea of the uncanny. It's always been, and photography has always been engaged with the surreal. I mean, you know, the whole idea of if you photograph something in a clear-eyed way, you know, there's sort of endless amounts of magic and wonder and mystery contained within that. And in some ways, the sort of the glitch framework is just a sort of updated framework for a concern that extends back to the very beginning of people photographing the US landscape. This is a lab where they're printing 3D moss.
It's our friends, and his name is Will Pepe. Is working on this project, and he talks often about how they can be used. Moss is like really great for cleaning air, better than a lot of mostly other pens. So it's very cool. Yeah.
So 3D printing organic material, like it ultimately is alive.
I really wish that I understood what he was doing a lot more.
But it can behave in a similar way.
Yeah, I think it behaves similar.
I don't want to
fully
overstep and say that it becomes organic material, but it's sort of technology replicating nature on some level. You know, some of the photographs were not planned, but it was just sort of something that we came across and that responded to because of the research that we'd done. This is the Herndon climb at the US Naval Academy in Annapolis. And we photographed this in May of last year. We'd heard about it because online people talk about it in a sort of funny way as as if there was one figure that had been copy pasted, or the way that, you know, again, sort of video games can glitch and all of a sudden one character becomes 20 and they're all kind of moving and bumping into each other. And even in the Matrix, you know, the agents kind of, you know, they duplicated kind of exponentially, and then they sort of clamber on top of each other. This is in Montezuma Canyon. These are people that have essentially displaced ancient historical sites and built their kind of doomsday homes, complete with direct TV satellite dishes.
There are hieroglyphics, I think, 50 feet from it. This was inspired by a photo that we found on the internet where someone posted it on Reddit and said that they cracked 2 eggs and one of them was inversed. And so we thought it would be really fun to recreate that image. A lot
It's a
harder
hard
than,
thing to do.
Very hard, yeah.
It took a lot of eggs.
Yeah.
So on the right, these are some of the video game glitches that we made. You know, this idea that you can find some sort of a portal and you can fall beneath the map, and sort of thinking about that as a symbol for how so much of this is, on some level, it's an attempt to understand like a bigger design. You know, it's that sort of yearning for meaning or a bigger order of things.
Mm-hmm.
David's essay, which is wonderful, it sort of covers an enormous amount of ground culturally and in its references to politics and cinema. And that's the book. And then alongside it, we worked on an insert, which will be sort of printed on very, very thin recycled paper. And we sort of reached out to a wide range of artists and writers and curators who we felt were, in one way or another, engaged with this idea of glitch and conspiracy theory and fake news and the ocean of images. And in a very open-ended way, we asked them to contribute some sort of reflection on conceptions of glitch in contemporary society. I really love the way that Jason sort of designed this, and for the attention span of someone in 2024 with the font and the font size changing from one page to the next.
So it was a very vague prompt that we gave them, and we specifically asked them to either talk about what they viewed as a conception of glitch, theoretically, physically, how they feel about it, or just talk about a story of a glitch that they experienced in their real life. Some people wrote poems. This was an actual glitch that someone received. So it was an eclectic range that I really liked and appreciated.
Yeah, that's American Glitch as it exists in soon to be book form.
Yeah.
Thank you for looking.
Thank you all for listening. Let me know if anyone has any questions, or happy to answer any. Yes.
Obviously, the way that the text kind of completes the work that you guys are doing is really important. you started to work with David, did you have an idea how you wanted the text to converse with the images you guys had assembled, or just say go for it, basically?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we met with him, had a few meals, and shared the work, and then he went off and wrote something, and wonderfully, it's not about our work, which was sort of important. I mean, of the 35 contributions to the booklet as well, I think there's only 2 that make a passing reference to our work, and we were very sort of explicit about that with the booklet. And with David, I think it was useful that he sort of didn't talk about our work. He just sort of used it as a launching point for thinking something through.
I also think that David has a very specific type of brilliant mind that is able to bring together. He can go from talking about photography to film to politics and put it all together in a way that's completely fresh in one sentence. And then he does that often in this essay. And so that's kind of what we were hoping for, I guess, which we knew he could do. And you know, he really did it. He blew it out of the water. We were so happy with this. And oftentimes when we're with him, we were with him the other day at a dinner, and someone asked us about our project, and I almost wanted to just pass the microphone to David. Just, can you please? Yeah, he really got it. Yeah. And also his book, American Roads, was very important for our ground research. And so we really like the full circle of it.
Our copy of that book is filled with tiny little yellow Post-its, and yeah, it's a wonderful book. Yeah,
thank you for the question.
Any other questions or thoughts?
It's like not fully formulated.
All good.
You talk a lot about like real and fake. And I've taught sculpture, and with people like discussing sculpture, they'll talk about like, is that a real tree or a fake tree? And I'm like, well, it exists. So it is. And then I guess my question is about like real, fake, and synthetic. And like what maybe for you makes something fake, I guess, or like how, like if it's there, it's like that like weird tree that's not a tree, it's like it's still real, but it's not. So that's the kind of amorphous blob of a question.
It's a great question.
Thank you for the question. We ask ourselves that question every day when we work on this project. Not sure we have an answer, but I have, I guess, an experience that kind of relates to what you're describing. Before photography, I had gone into film. I thought I was going to work in film. And there was this process in this like editing room with sound where one scene that we were editing had a car crash in it, and we were looking at all these libraries of sounds of car crashes, and they're real car crashes. And we're just like, that's not the right sound. That's not the sound of a car crash. And it literally is, you know, a car, like that's not the sound of a car crash. And then we think of like Foley sound, right? It's the Foley sound the studios use. And actually the real library version of the sound of a car crash is actually crushing a cardboard box. And I feel like next time someone like crushes a cardboard box when you're, you know, recycling your Amazon boxes or something, you'll see that it actually sounds like, if you don't look at what you're doing, it sounds like a car crash, and it's more real than the actual sound that we were sourcing on YouTube. And so that kind of experience of sometimes having something that's fake, that's actually more accurate to the experience than the real thing itself. I don't know if that answers your question, but my other background, I guess, is in cognitive science, and I did AI work. And at first I thought that I did a duo situation at Vassar where it was like art and cog sci, and I thought AI was my backup because I didn't think AI was going to actually hit the ground anytime soon. So, but a lot of times we talked about perception, how the glitch is in our perception. It's not the world. The world is what it is, and the glitch is just our perception. I kind of like that, and that stayed with me.
Yeah, those are really wonderful examples. I can't think of anything specific, but
but I would say that not knowing has been a key part of all of this, because I think we've looked at this work as sort of an act of placemaking, and we're sort of fine with not having answers and just, asking the questions and kind of really putting ourselves front and center in that experience of feeling overwhelmed by all of this and feeling inundated, and in that way sort of thinking about how artists can be sort of organizers for conversation, and also how artists can function as researchers of a sort. And that's kind of been some of our approach to this.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What was your criteria like? Because you mentioned you do a lot of research and you have a whole binder full of locations. Like, what was your criteria like for finding a location that you actually want to photograph, and did that change while you were in the process?
Really good question too.
Do you want to go first?
Okay. So we had like different layers of filters. So because it was so many images that we couldn't start off by saying, okay, we're picking them all now. We couldn't do that. So we're like, okay, the first is going to be just a gut reaction. We just dragged every image that we had a gut reaction to, even if we thought we could actually photograph it. For example, the fake Iraqi village, which is a military village, when we dragged it, we were like, there's no way we're going to be able to photograph this, but just don't even, just drag, right? And then we went through that visually and then said, what are we interested in photographing? That was the second one that kind of spoke to, again, our gut, right, of what, and I guess that's where it doesn't necessarily,
I think there were many filters. I think one sort of immediate initial filter was, has this location been cited as a glitch or as something uncanny, or as evidence, satirical evidence of us living in a simulation, or is the Matrix referenced, or is the Truman Show referenced? So that was one level of kind of cultural research. And then another level was taking stock of work that we love that's been made in the US that feels uncanny, or that feels like it embodies some of those things that we've mentioned in this talk. And then also sort of, after steeping ourselves in all of that, then beginning to take more liberties with what we see as a glitch, and kind of giving ourselves permission to loosen up the framework and allow it to include things that maybe it's just that it's a place that sort of claims to simulate something, or maybe it's a place that, to your question earlier, that states that it is something that it is on some level is not. It's a sort of it's synthetic, to use your word. And then the video game question. This idea of, okay, well, a lot of these people that are joking that we're living in a simulation are saying, okay, well, then everything is kind of 3D modeled, and there's a sort of the mesh layer that comes with 3D modeling, and then there's a texture that's applied to it. And early in this project, we thought, well, maybe this work is going to require us to do sort of extensive sort of 3D modeling to sort of build whole landscapes. And so we kind of familiarized ourselves with what that process entailed. And then, for example, with the aerial views of California City, or the views of the fake Iraqi village, or Abraham Lincoln with the drone next to him, all of those things to us, they sort of fell into that category of, okay, well, maybe they could be seen as a bit of 3D modeling where the texture has fallen off and it's glitched. And so on a visual level, we were sort of playfully making that connection too.
I think also, if an image had been posted by many different people with, endless views of it, we were really drawn to that as well. We just said, okay, the more, the better. Yeah. And then,
Yeah, Sarah.
I'm curious, this feels very American in the direction that you've gone and the places that you photograph, but
what do people like who don't live in America and maybe don't have this, like, aren't part of a culture that's sort of maybe more obsessed with this glitch or these sort of like military sites, like, or is there, do these people exist everywhere? Have you found, like, is that, this is very American.
We do have a folder called Glitch Worldwide. There are a lot of locations in China and in Russia.
Wherever there's an immense concentration of power, there seems
And
to
land.
be a lot of glitch.
Yeah, lots of power, lots of land, lots of glitches. But also, I guess my family in Colombia and Caleb's family in the UK might be pretty good reference points, I guess, to that, because they're close to us, so they can be the most honest with us and just say, what is this? Or, you know what I mean? Like, and I don't know about you, but the kind of pattern that I've seen between my family is like the people who watch more TV will immediately get it. And people who don't watch that many movies, and that's another part of this project and our previous project, Long Time No See, is that we are really interested in the US's specific position with Hollywood, right? And, you know, there's nothing else in the world like the Oscars. Like you know, you go to LA, you know, everybody knows LA for that. So it's kind of like they have a very big microphone, a big global microphone. And so, you know, the idea of Matrix or simulation or Black Mirror, the younger generations in my Colombian family do get it. The people who love films do, but some people definitely are like, what is this? Yeah.
Yeah, we do get that. We do get, how is this a glitch, or what is this?
Yeah. But then I love when they find the glitch, and I love when they find the glitch that I didn't see, and then I can't unsee it after that. Yeah, it wasn't ours, it was there. It's a little scary because we're just photographing. This is a field that we found. I don't know if you guys know the website Atlas Obscura.
Great website.
Great website. I love that nodding heads. This was huge on Atlas Obscura, and a lot of comments referenced it.
There
as
must
this
have been
field,
something like
yeah.
5,000 pictures that other people had made of the same site.
And so it's like this, they were like referencing this field in the middle of nowhere, like with just a bunch of presidential busts, and that was it. And nobody knew who they belonged to, nobody knew what they were for. And Abe Lincoln's had a missing back, which was, you know, I guess symbolic. But we were there photographing, and so this is a field that we just found on this obscure website, and there's no one else around us. And then there's a drone, and it felt we do like that it gives a scale reference, because this, for us, feel like it could be grass or it could be not, but this is maybe like a 4 or 5 level building height. It's pretty large.
That's a key point that for me, what you've just mentioned, this idea of scale, how expectations about scale can be sort of a perception glitch as well. And so a lot of the photographs play around with that. They try to sort of remove spatial cues or put tiny little spatial cues in that otherwise, you know, you'd be lost without. And one of my favorite contributions to the text booklet is from a wonderful art historian called Angela Brown. And she talks about how she was at a party in the Hudson Valley, and there was a bowl of I think it was tomatoes, and only one of them had a label on it. And she said, well, she went to the host of the party and she said, why do you have one fake one? And then another time she was sitting on the banks of the Seine and she was sort of dangling her feet in front of her, and there was a bottle that was floating down the Seine, and her immediate thought was, why is that bottle so tiny? So it's just these, you know, there are these moments where our perception kind of it jolts, or the software stops working for a second, and that's something that we sort of played around with photographically.
I one time swiped the book.
Oh my God, yeah.
That's a really good one.
Wait,
yeah,
I'm
that is
gonna
a
tell
glitch.
Jason that. I'm gonna say that to Jason. Yeah, that's so good.
As you guys were talking about this work, a lot of the other projects that were coming to my mind as references it occurred to me that the ones that were coming to my mind were also artistic duos, collaborators. Whether it was like
Yeah.
Larry Sullivan and Mike Mandel Evidence, or Andrew Phelps and Paul Cransley, The Drake Equation.
No, I didn't know that work.
There were like a couple artistic duos that
Yeah.
like.
Tayo Honorado and Nico Krebs.
Krebs.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's anything to be said about the collaboration of two people. 'Cause
Mhm.
maybe when you venture into this territory of like what is real, you need to have some pull you back if you're starting to
That's
Yeah.
I think that's so on point. I completely agree with you. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. That's really interesting, and we actually had never talked about that or noticed that. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, there were moments in which we were making this work. We just looked at each other and we said, "Okay, this is too much. We need a break. Like this is deep. This deep hole that we've in the deep rabbit
Big
hole in the
rabbit hole.
internet." But I think also working as a duo, even before this project, we had to work a lot on our communication. And through working through our communication, realizing that we have completely different perceptions of things sometimes, of what is real, what is synthetic, why that's not synthetic to me, that's real to me. And then just probably having that experience subconsciously maybe informed it. But I'm coming up with this right now because I hadn't thought of that. But that's really interesting. Yeah.
But also, we're always kind of, apart from our collaboration, all of the work that we do together, it's always like looking to a collective, kind of embracing the power of a collective, how there are certain images or feelings or words that in some ways feel fairly universal, and then thinking about how we can sort of engage with that and then thread it through our own collaboration. And there's that really beautiful Edouard Glissant quote where he said, "I can change through exchange." And that's something that we think about a lot, and we really love that way of thinking about things.
I think there's something also hyper specific about it that helps to have it as a project as a duo. Because, for example, we have a shared archive where we just constantly send each other. It doesn't have to be art. It can be like, I like this chair. I like how this cement moves. Like, you don't expect cement to move. You know, there are all these like, and often when we share things like that, is when you think about like what you would send to a friend or someone, like usually it's uncanny. It's a lot of, we already had a lot of years of groundwork,
It's
of visual exchange.
10 years of
Yeah.
building a shared frame of reference, so that hopefully at least some of the time you can make work without having to use too much language.
I love this one. Another one of my favorites, like my girls. This is from that fake Boeing town. They're actors pretending to lie on the lawn.
So is the purpose so that if anyone's flying over,
They won't bomb it.
They won't
Yeah.
see it as a key strategic target, and they'll
Yeah.
sort of leave it alone.
it's still there?
No, unfortunately, we
It's in
really wanted to
Seattle.
photograph it. Yeah, but it's interesting because the actual ground, from almost like a dissected perspective of it, architecturally, you'll have the ground right here with the grass, and then under it you have the plains. Yeah.
Like this could have been in evidence.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, very detailed work.
Yeah.
Very detailed.
It almost feels like you could manipulate them like a puppet.
Mm.
This feels like that film that came out last year, where they live in that town. Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, is that with the wife? Don't worry, darling.
We need
Yeah.
to watch this. This is
Yeah.
like the 5th time now that
I
someone said
started-
you guys need to watch
Yeah,
this.
I started watching it at one point, but I think when I started watching it, we were very deep in it, and I was like, I can't see this right now. But I have to go back to it. But also like Pleasantville, or no, not Pleasant. Which was the one that came to mind?
Stepford
Stepford Wives is very similar
Which
to
there
that
may
too.
even, I think there's a picture of
Barbie too.
Barbie.
We really wanted to photograph
Oh,
the Barbie
we
set.
really wanted
Yeah.
to photograph. Did you hear that there was a pink paint shortage from like a worldwide? Did you? Are we the only ones that heard that? Or?
Mm.
Did you find that out in deep web?
No, just by
I
living in
don't
Brooklyn.
know.
Just-
Maybe actually, yeah.
And so your book is coming, it says, you said published in February
Mhm.
2024, is it, can people order it then? or-
I think, yeah, so there's a pre-order right now. The QR code is in the back if anyone here would like to pre-order it at any point. And yes, we were hoping to have it here tonight, but there was a lot of backlog with publishing, as one might expect in these times. But yeah, February, Gnomic Books. Yeah, yeah. Love Jason's designs, and also Shane Rochelou did the edit. Yeah.
Jason joined us last year.
Sorry?
Oh, nice.
Jason was here last year.
Oh, was he? Oh, cool. It has been great. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a very talented designer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, Alice. This was wonderful.
Thank you all.
Thank you.